Today, I'll be interviewing a woman who was victimized by a helping professional. We're going to call her Esther. Before we get to her story, I'm going to talk about how to heal from emotional wounds. Step one is recognizing what caused the emotional wounds. If you don't know what caused it, it's really hard to get the right kind of help. The Betrayal Trauma Recovery Living Free workshop helps women see exactly what's going on, and you can get more information at btr.org/livingfree. And step two, healing emotional wounds takes the right kind of help. If you go to a professional or therapist and they give equal value to his abusive narrative or his lies and the truth, that's not safe. You can't heal the emotional wounds if they're still occurring, especially if they're coming from a helping professional. As Esther shares her story, you'll see that she correctly identifies what happened to her in her marriage. And then she's going to talk about the emotional wounds she received when she went for help, and it wasn't a safe situation. Welcome, Esther. I'm so honored that you'd share your story. Will you go ahead and start?
Hi, thank you for having me. So I was married and had a lot of kids. I was a homeschooling mom, and I went online looking for answers. I took some quiz. I think it was a domestic violence recovery organization in the UK. And the end of it said, "You are being abused, you are being mistreated." And it was really the first time that those words or thoughts came into my mind. I just never saw that. I always thought, oh, he has ADHD or he has depression or it's his culture. And the fact that I might be intentionally harmed and controlled and manipulated was a very shocking, painful realization. So I went right away into helper mode. Okay, what can we do? What can he do? What can I do? And I went into support for myself, for DV victims through my county. I put my kids in counseling, and I asked my husband to please go to abuser counseling, because I didn't understand what a deep entrenched issue it was. I thought it was like a mistake or something that could be unlearned. I was thinking, well, he'll just go to a class and he'll realize that this is bad and we'll just move on. I just saw it as, okay, let's fix this. I said, you have to go to an abuser intervention program. You have to do this, or my thought was separation. Divorce wasn't part of my view as a Christian at that time. I've since changed my view. I don't believe that God wants abuse. But at that time, I gave him a list of things to do. They were supposedly going to be proofs that he was changing, included having a mentor, it included going to therapy, and included going to an abuser program. He went to 2 abuser groups. He would apologize a lot, and I'd get all these words and I'd get flowers. And he just lied to the therapist. He could manipulate therapists. And that was disturbing because he was using them against me.
Were you aware of any pornography use or cheating or infidelity or anything like that?
His views of women were really warped, very sexist, using me as an object. I used to put religious labels on this and sort of make it a holy thing. But as I started to get more and more free, I started to recognize his view of women in general was a big part of the mistreatment of me. And unfortunately, that would cause harm to my daughters. That showed me that this was a lot bigger than me. I remember looking at his computer. I was like, who is this man really? I felt like there were secrets in his life because he'd hide money from me in a weird way. I was homeschooling 4 kids, and one of them had an autism diagnosis. So that took all my time. I didn't really have time to notice or pay attention to myself. I was all about the kids. I was all about trying to teach my son well. When I recognized I'm an abused woman, I pivoted in my mind, like, how did this happen? How did I end up here? I had a million questions. And so I just started reading every single book I could. What is abuse? How do I recognize it? What about me made me vulnerable? How do I know he's changing? So I was just a sponge reading every book I could find. God opened my eyes and I started to see he could stop. It was possible, but he wasn't. And because of that, we did get divorced and I started running for personal healing.
Were you partially running toward healing because you were still experiencing abuse?
Oh, that's an excellent question. I was experiencing post-separation abuse. I was still trying to find help. I went to a parent coordinator told him everything. It was very traumatizing because he'd ask me these personal questions. Well, when you did this, how did you feel? When you did this, how did you feel? And I would just be bringing up all these abusive episodes, crying. And my ex had no empathy whatsoever. He just sat there like a stone while I'm crying. And when my ex went to the bathroom, the parent counselor said, I know what's going on with you. I've seen it before. I just want you to know, even if you win, he will make you lose. And I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, so if you get what you believe is owed to you in court, this guy's going to come behind you in a covert way and take revenge. And that ended up being true. When I was winning in court, he went after one of my kids in a really vicious way. And so I'm trying to get him in home therapy and advocate for him at his school. Meanwhile, he's just telling lies about me. And I started to wonder, like, is he having a psychotic break? Is he actually perceiving reality wrongly? Or is he just lying? Why would he do that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so the post divorce time was absolutely awful.
I'm guessing that people are treating you as if you just need to heal rather than recognizing that you can't even begin to heal because you're still being abused post divorce. And so when women talk to other people and they say, well, didn't you divorce him a year ago? Don't you just need to move on? Not realizing that the abuse you're experiencing is still real time, like it happened today or yesterday. It's not something that's in the past.
Mm,
So a lot of women talk about their PTSD, and I'm like, it's just TSD because it's not
mm,
post, it's current, it's happening now.
that's right. So, a big question on my heart was, why did he do this? I loved him. I had children with him. Why would he treat me this way? And part of that understanding was to also help me navigate that extremely difficult post separation period. I was reading this book by a very famous author, like, oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, look at this, look at that. And I remember being very impressed and motivated by the book. Certain ideas in the book were very empowering for me. Because of that, I would quote it to my friends. A lot of us didn't really have a correct understanding of intentional control, coercive control. When a person is controlling another person intentionally by controlling their emotions, information, and I guess the main idea in the book, it is intentional. So the book felt empowering. Like, this man is choosing to do this to avoid doing chores and helping out with the children. He's doing it to avoid being equal to me, or he's doing it in order to gain an advantage over me. And it seemed to answer certain questions I had in my heart because my ex was covert in certain ways. I mean, I see it pretty clearly now, but it was so covert. I had to constantly go back to, he's not wanting an equal relationship. He's wanting power over me. He's willing to hurt me to have that. And I had to keep going back to that in order to survive emotionally and help my kids survive. So, what happened next is I went to the famous author's website and found out that he was offering a retreat for women that were leaving abusive relationships that were no longer in them so that they were post abuse. And I thought it might be a really good thing for me. So, I got someone to watch my children, got time off work. I went to the retreat. It was held in a very beautiful location. It was green. I went with a very open heart, ready to be vulnerable. I was really looking forward to a place where I could just be very open about what I'd gone through in the marriage. I think a lot of moms who are survivors who have to go to work, or we are not really letting people know what we've gone through. I definitely didn't talk about it that much. I was just functioning and trying to get things done and paying the bills. So I was looking forward to being in a place where I could just talk about what had happened and not be judged and receive healing and wisdom and validation from other women. And I remember when he first walked in the door, he looked at me, he made eye contact, and I noticed him noticing me. And it kind of was like longer than just a normal, hi, how are you? I noticed that I was sort of on his radar. And I was flattered. I was excited. So I'd only been divorced 1 year. However, I was pregnant right after my divorce. It wasn't a wise decision, but I love my baby. He's amazing.
Mhm.
I'm so thankful for him. So I'm going into this retreat visibly pregnant. They had sent an email, if you have a gift for the group, why won't you come and perform for us and share it? And I was a certified Zumba instructor. So I was like, oh, sure, I can lead Zumba for you guys. And I also offered to help with karaoke because I used to sing at different churches. And I did that. Like, yay, let's do this.
The idea of being seen, your talents being seen and appreciated. We don't feel seen or appreciated in our abusive marriage. So, of course, you'd be excited about that.
You're
Yeah.
right. Yeah, that's so true. I lost my identity in that marriage. The things that I loved, I sacrificed everything. And when I was divorced, I started regaining my personality. I started remembering, oh, I love to sing. I can sing. Oh, I like to go to the gym. I can go to the gym. My ex didn't like me going to the gym. It was always this stressful thing to go to the gym. I'd be stressed to leave the kids at home. He'd make negative or mocking comments about the gym. So it was one of the many things I let go of when I was married. Just these aspects of my personality, I'd start to gain them back one at a time. It was amazing. And going to that retreat was supposed to be part of that journey. Unfortunately, it took a negative turn, not immediately, but during that retreat, famous author was giving me attention. And I didn't really think anything unusual of it because I'm friendly, I'm extroverted, I like talking to people. I like to be an A student, or like, here's the teacher, let me learn from him. So I was all in. And he's like, oh, do you guys have any questions? And one of my questions was, what advice would you give for a future writer? And he said, oh, well, let's meet in the morning and we'll talk about it. So he had a writers group in the morning based on that question that I had. And he was talking to me a lot. I don't know if my radar was not recognizing that that was unusual, but I liked it. Oh, I'm getting all this attention from this famous guy. There was one strange part where we were standing in this circle facing one direction, giving the person in front of us a back rub. Then you turn to the other side and give the other person a back rub. And I remember thinking that was strange because so many of us were survivors of sexual abuse, and we definitely didn't want people touching us. I remember thinking, ew, I don't know if I like this. This feels weird. It wasn't that cool. Um, Following the retreat, famous guy and we were emailing, and then we end up talking on the phone. We end up chatting it up a bit. It starts to feel kind of datey. I start to gain the vibe that he's interested. And then he decides to visit me in my town, and he asked me if he could stay at my house with my kids, which I thought was super strange. I'm like, I've got kids here. No way. So I told him there's a lot of hotels near my house. So we stayed at a hotel. After these weeks of flirting, emailing, and phone calls, we meet early in the morning on our first date, and we're together the whole day. We're holding hands, we're kissing. It's very romantic. He seemed great. However, as the day went on, when we were talking in different places, I remember noticing that something was off in how he was acting. I noticed that there were two voices. There was like the professional guy that was like, oh, I'm so sweet and I'm so empathetic to you. But then there was another voice. And when that second voice came out, I started getting fear in my stomach. It was like an internal alarm, just feminine intuition. He didn't like do anything violent. So part of my mind is just panicking, like, who am I here with? And then the other part was like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm imagining it. Later on, we were in his hotel room. We started to get more physical. He went faster than I wanted him to go. He did more than I wanted him to do, and I asked him to stop. He did stop. I remember him lying on his back, looking up at the wall with this like cold face, kind of pissed off, like angry. I didn't know he'd be furious about that. When I look back, I'm like, oh, he probably just came for sex and was probably really irritated when it didn't happen. The next morning, I made him breakfast. Like, he was just looking at me like, what is your problem? And I don't know if the word is scared, but like, ugh, I cannot wait till he's gone. And when he finally left, he said goodbye, smiled this like fake smile at me, and then he turned and he was cold as ice and irritated. I'll never forget the way his face changed. It was shocking. I felt this pain throughout my body, like in my brain. My thoughts were not connecting. I was ruminating about the situation. It just kept going around and around in circles. Like, how the heck could that man be this when he's writing these books? Or who is he even?
All women resist abuse, and that's something that people don't understand. It gets turned into victim blaming rather than
Hmm.
realizing that any woman who's been victimized is going to want to piece her dignity back together. Sometimes confronting an abuser is a way that we feel like we might be able to piece our dignity back together. Can you talk about that?
I didn't immediately cut off communication because I didn't really want it to be true. It's like, no, this could not be possible. I guess I was in disbelief. I didn't want people to read a book by this guy and then go to his retreats and he's a jerk. It was just horrible. I was like, can that actually be true? Like I wanted my world to make more sense. I wanted the guy from the book back.
Because you felt so validated in his books, does it invalidate all of these things that you learned and maybe it is your fault, like your husband said?
Yes, that's exactly it. Doesn't make his books wrong. For a long time was wishing it was my fault because that was better than knowing that this guy with this great book that everyone loves. I'd
Mhm.
rather something was wrong with me. I didn't want to discover what I discovered. Even when it was over with him and me, and I processed it, and I was like, that was weird that he dated me after I was at the retreat when he's basically a counselor, not someone who charges retreat. He knows what power is, he understands power differentials. He knows that's not right. It feels so yucky. Like, why do I have so much trauma from this? Like, why is my brain getting numb? It doesn't feel like, oh, I went on a date and it was a bad date. It feels more violating. I decided to research and try to find out if there were more victims. I met some of those
Mhm.
people and I found out that I was not alone. If you really want to test out if a man is abusive, tell him no.
Yeah. Yeah, you told him no and you saw what happened, and then you had it confirmed by these other victims who had experiences with him. I'm so glad that you got that validation from those other women. I want to pause right here and talk about one section of that book. At the end, it says something like, in order for these guys to change, everyone would need to confront them. Their therapist, their church leader, the police, like everybody in the community. We're all desperate for our abuser to change so that we can keep our family together. I mean, I've interviewed over 300 abuse victims,
Wow.
long form interviews like this one, hour-long interviews. So, what victims take from him writing that is the impression that even though it's a long shot, I'm going to see if I can get the therapist and the clergy and the police and his mother and everyone to confront him. And then maybe he'll see the light. Maybe that will save my marriage. I tried that. I think so many women have, and it didn't work. The court didn't hold my ex accountable. In fact, when I tried to have his custody reduced for abusing my kids, the court gave him more custody. And I sought God's help to discover what would really free me from my ex's abuse. And through that, I discovered these really great strategies that I put in the Living Free workshop. I had to do it like that because it's not like anything anybody has ever heard before. And I had to set it up the right way. So the Living Free workshop helps women understand who they are and then how to strategically deal with them. Get to emotional and psychological safety that looks for you, and then observe from a safe distance. Because a lot of us have been manipulated to be detached from our intuition through the Living Free workshop, through everything that I do here at BTR. My hope is to give women the confidence to reconnect with their gut. And you did that. On that date with him, your intuition was warning you and you listened. Even if you didn't want it to be true, you took at least a mental step back and started observing. That will always lead victims to the truth.
That's so true. Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, because I did confront him. Can't you at least admit shouldn't be dating the women that you are teaching about abuse? It did not go well. He was gaslighting. I left that 30-minute conversation feeling completely confused. And I was like, that was not wise. Which is interesting that he would actually give advice to confront people.
Because they actually like confrontation. The living free strategies came to me over years and years of all of these interviews, but also my own experience. And one of the things I saw over and over again was in custody cases where the women had a lot of proof of their abuse. Even so, the abusers walk into court super excited and happy. Court really stresses victims out. I mean, we think it's miserable and super stressful, but this type of abuser, they like the confrontation that court affords them.
That's true. They like to fight.
And so if they can get a hold of something, some emotion, something we want from them, it could be an apology, it could be that they stop doing what they're doing, anything. The only thing they see is a way to manipulate us. That's it. That is why observing from a safe distance is safer for victims than trying to get him to do something, whether that be an abusive husband or an abusive ex-husband or an abusive therapist or abusive counselor.
Absolutely.
Well, Esther, thank you so much for sharing your story. I know that it's been so traumatic. I think it's important to hear these stories so women are aware of what can happen when they do go for help and how to recognize the right kind of help, because it's impossible to heal from an emotional wound if we're still receiving emotional wounds. So thank you so much for sharing your story today.